Saturday View on Midlands 103. With thanks to Lumclean Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcleanEnergy.com. Have your say. Call 0818 300 103. Text or WhatsApp your Saturday View to 083 3010 103.
Hello and welcome and good morning. David Hollywood sitting in for Ronan Berry this morning. This is your Saturday View, so get your thoughts into me on 083 30 10 103. Let's have a look at what's coming up on the programme. Very shortly, we'll be joined by the Minister for Trade, Enterprise and Employment. Peter Burke's on hand to run the rule over the UK election, and we'll do what we can to extract some idea of when our general election will be. Waterways Ireland have been in the headlines regarding their soon-to-be updated bylaws. This update will include increased registration fees. Mooring fees are on the rise as well. We'll get the perspective from those working on the Shannon. You'll hear from the pleasure cruise renters of the Midlands. It looks like taxi fares are on the rise as well. We find out by how much, why it's happening and how they're going about it. And you'll meet a woman who's climbing the Mont Blanc. This is one of the biggest mountains in Western Europe. And she's doing it all in the name of a Leash Dog Rescue Centre. So loads to look forward to on the programme. Well, Thursday night, Friday morning was one of historic proportion. Keir Starmer and Labour stormed to an enormous general election victory. The party now has more than 410 MPs, ending 14 years of Conservative rule. This obviously will have plenty of ramifications in Ireland. I'm very glad to say to discuss some of those, we're joined by Peter Burke, Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Longford and Westmeath, TD for Fine Gael. Peter, you were also of course, in the Department of Foreign Affairs previously, but we'll touch on the enterprise perspective first. What do you think this week's result in the UK election will do for enterprise and trade between the two nations?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very significant majority that Labour have achieved. I hope now that we get back to working in partnership, essentially hand in glove with the UK administration, because it has been difficult. Obviously, the Windsor Framework provides a very significant relationship into the future. But I would say that it's so important that we work together, our two countries, very closely. I think the new administration gives a chance for a new dawn in that relationship.
Just how testing was the relationship between the two countries when it came to business and trade?
I think it was very challenging at times, and we would have seen obviously Ireland working together with our European partners. Obviously, when you're dealing in trade, you're dealing with the European institution as one block, because the trade competency together by the Trade Commissioner. But when Maroš Šefčovič was trying to get significant deals across the line, it was very challenging. And the outworkings of that was that it's almost a surprise if the Taoiseach meets the UK Prime Minister. And that should never be the case, because the relationship should always be close. And post-Brexit, obviously, when they're not meeting at European Council meetings or other ministerial meetings, that structure isn't there. We need the Good Friday Agreement back working again across all three strands, that everyone is working in partnership, that ministers north and south, east and west are now meeting together through the British Irish Council and other fora like that is going to be so important. And we have been very much advocates for the UK to be admitted into Horizon Europe, where they get obviously the cutting edge of research and development shared around Europe, and all those key capital funding streams and knowledge streams. We've been an advocate for the UK. So hopefully we'll see that reciprocated now, and that we'll build on a very strong relationship, and that the Taoiseach gets a meeting with the new Prime Minister very shortly.
It sounds like the first and most important thing in relation to this change is the diplomatic relationship between both Ireland and the UK will improve, between the UK and the EU, and then flowing on from that, stuff like business and trade and enterprise will benefit.
Absolutely. And I think and I know there will be a very bright relationship ahead. And, you know, so many issues that have been of key frustration, like the Legacy Act. Labour obviously have that in their manifesto, which hopefully will be brought in quickly, that piece of legislation is repealed, because the last thing you want to be doing is to be taking your nearest neighbour to court. That's not a good start of any relationship. So hopefully that the new Prime Minister will make that a priority to repeal that piece of legislation, and that we will be working together, because there is so much We have so much shared heritage between our two countries, and it's important that we build on that relationship. We obviously have the common travel area, which is very important. We have a unique number of agreements under the Good Friday Agreement, and subsequently on a European perspective with the Windsor Framework and the outworkings from that, and the unique position that the Northern Irish economy is in, which is, exceptional, getting dual use of both markets and the chances that they have now into the future of growing and strengthening their economy. So we have a huge amount of work to do, and the critical thing is that we're working together, that each is in unison, and that's what we want to get into, that very important space that genuinely we haven't been in. I know it did improve under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, but still it just wasn't exactly where we wanted.
We'll just briefly talk about the political side of the dynamics in the UK in a moment. Just to finish off the point on Keir Starmer taking over the premiership of the United Kingdom. As you mentioned, the Good Friday Agreement there, of course, the UK Labour Party co-authors of that agreement. So they will have, you would expect and presume, a much stronger respect for where it comes from and the impacts that changes have upon it. And then the other side of that, of course, is that Keir Starmer has practical working legal experience reforming the PSNI or working with the PSNI over human rights as well in the region of Northern Ireland. That must carry huge weight to think that he will have such an understanding of what goes on this island compared to his predecessors.
Absolutely, that's going to be so important. We have seen that Keir Starmer, when he was in opposition and leader of the opposition, he has been over to Ireland. He's met with all and a number of politicians, both opposition and government. He really showed a great deal of respect to listen and learn, and in terms of his perspective on Northern Ireland, in terms of his commitment to repealing the Legacy Act. But I would also say that what the Good Friday Agreement is built upon is consent, is working in partnership. From the previous, which it is now, administration, is unilateral action. On so many occasions, initiatives were taken without consultation with the five parties in Northern Ireland, without consultation with our own government. And that has been a very poor approach. So we want to get on to partnership approach, that we know what the UK is thinking and they know what we are thinking, and that the five parties in Northern Ireland are briefed at all stages. That's the key to success, and that's the pillar that the Good Friday Agreement was built to. Consent across all communities, and we have exciting opportunities working with the new UK administration through the Shared Island Fund, €1 billion of north-south projects that we can get on the road and continue with. We've seen some exciting projects improving infrastructure north and south, and we've more that we can do with the UK administration if they commit to funding on their side. Exciting opportunity for all communities in Northern Ireland.
Peter, your party has a fair bit of experience when it comes to being in power for a protracted period of time and the challenges that come with that. In large part, was it that long time in government that undermined the Tories' focus when it came to recent years? What do you put down their historic, like it is a mind-blowing drop-off in terms of their number of seats? What do you put their implosion down to?
Well, first of all, I think on a number of occasions they fell into that rabbit hole. I think Brexit was the first key point. I don't think it's the length of time the administration was there. I think their policy on Brexit was very harmful. The premise of Brexit was it was going to sort out the immigration problem. You saw so many posters with Syrian refugees in the background of it, and people not asking the question, they are not Europeans. Why are we blaming Europe for this problem? Europe is trying to resolve the problem. And what happened when the UK left Europe is that quite rapidly the amount of people seeking asylum, seeking protection in the UK increased drastically, up to 1 million people since Brexit, which is a huge increase. And essentially, when you go down that path and promising simple solutions to very complex geopolitical problems, I think that was a very slippery slope. And that led to a situation with the Rwanda policy, €500 million spent on it, and only people that went to Rwanda were government ministers. And we have seen subsequent to that, people from Rwanda turn up at the UK seeking asylum after they're spending all that money on, again, a simple solution to a complex problem. So I think what we have seen here is that we have a new administration offering fresh ideas, and that politics is about substance into the future. And if you offer policy that is substantial, that shows a pathway to a brighter future, and that is realistic and honest with people, I think people will vote for centre ground politics like that. And you have seen that since Jeremy Corbyn, Labour have moved more to the centre ground. And again, as we always see in Ireland, and hopefully we'll continue to see, the policies of the progressive centre have held strong. And I know they are not what they were back 20 years ago, but still they're over 50%. So that's a big help.
Yeah, and if you look at the Lib Dems benefit as well, the centre really did get a big vindication in the UK general election. A final point on the UK election is that another part of the Tory implosion was just how much they were undermined by votes going over to Reform and Nigel Farage's, I suppose, personality-driven campaign. Do you see the Tories having to move to the right to win those votes back? I know they didn't lose too many seats necessarily, but they lost a large number of votes that probably benefited Labour. Or will they have to move to the centre, like you're saying, where maybe the main battleground is in the UK?
I would absolutely welcome any party moving to centre ground politics. But it's very interesting if you look at the UK system. So it's very interesting to see the huge haul of seats Labour is after winning. Yes, it increased on its previous election, on the last election, by probably about 1.9% in the vote. And what that means, it really shows what Reform can do, is that when you're operating on a first past the post system, if you have another party that compromises your vote in any way, even though your vote share can be substantial, you won't get the seats because it's first past the post. So you can see that you have parties getting substantial votes but very little seats. So it's very interesting how that dynamic will play out. I think it will potentially force the Conservatives to have a relook at their policy, because it's going to cost them into the future. Obviously, Nigel Farage was one of those key people who stood on that poster with Syrian refugees behind him in Brexit, taking part in that big lie. I remember when I met Michel Barnier, who negotiated, obviously, did so much for Brexit, for Ireland, for Europe at that particular time, telling me after authoring his book, how much politics has changed and how much lies like that aren't stress tested enough, because the discourse was so binary in the UK at that time, almost that Europe was responsible for everything bad. And sometimes I'd say to communities, when we see in Ireland too, we have to be so careful that when we talk about Europe and blame Europe for rules and regulations, we are Europe. Ireland is Europe. So we need to continue to send our brightest and best over to Europe through our MEPs, and really work that we are front and centre in developing policy there that we can play our strong part in. And some policies that can be difficult, we have to try and neutralise them and work with Europe, because when there are frustrations, the benefits way outweigh that in terms of getting access to 500 million people. And the UK are seeing now their economy is in significant stress in various different points, because their access is difficult. They thought they could, negotiate trade deals right around the world, but it's not that simple.
A final question then, Peter. I was talking to Kevin Boxer-Moran yesterday, and he said Simon Harris has no choice but to call a general election after the budget, considering the parameters politically that are at play. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, I'd like to wish Kevin the very best. He got a huge vote getting back into Westmeath County Council, a very strong endorsement. So I want to wish him the best in the future and his family. I think, first of all, there is obviously always a choice. So the choice presented to Taoiseach is put a strong budget together. I think that's very important. Me, as a minister in the Department of Enterprise, I think, and I know what businesses need, what the economy needs is certainty. And that's why the most important thing I would ask for is a very strong budget. I'm working with the Minister of Finance and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform with my bilateral meetings now, trying to ensure I have an exceptionally strong budget for business, that we can see the hallmark for our small businesses, which employs 70% of the people right across our country, all over that budget. We have to get the finance bill through, the social welfare bill through. So that is going to take us a significant journey. I would think there is a very strong possibility of the government running the full term. But ultimately, if the government leaders that have to make that call, it's never an easy call, and they're very clear that they're going to go the full term. But we always know, David, events in politics, it's just always very hard to predict the future.
Yeah, these full-term references, they do seem a bit half-hearted from people in government like yourself, and the budget being more moved forward by the week seems to be a very explicit nod of the head to at least making the space for this potential November election.
Well, to be fair, I think in moving the budget forward, obviously there's an important meeting in ECOFIN that both ministers have to be at. Obviously, Pascal Donoghue has a very important role as being president of ECOFIN, which is very important for our country too. And we saw that in terms of the deal that was agreed for the corporation tax that didn't exceed 15%, which was so important. But I wouldn't take anything as such from bringing the budget forward. I think Taoiseach is committed to get as much done as he can for the time he's going to be there. And we're very committed to seeing this government to the end. But as I said, and I'll be always very honest with people, yourself and our listeners, you just never know in politics. So many things can happen in politics, but we're working so hard. And I think that, and I know, which I feel as a minister, we're working so hard at the minute. There's been a whole new emphasis under Simon Harris. Like, his energy is absolutely outstanding. I think over the 4 weeks building up to the local elections, he did more miles than would take you from Ireland to Tokyo around the country. Over 10,000 miles he did in the space of 4 weeks. So he's done exceptional work, huge energy. And I do feel that he wants to keep going at that, and he's going to put a very strong proposition to the people from the Fine Gael's perspective at the next election, whenever that is.
Yeah, big thanks to Peter Burke. Next up, the waterways of Ireland and the Midlands are the lifeblood for the local economies that live around them. Waterways Ireland are putting up their fees. We're heading to Banagher to see what impact that will have. I can tell you right now in Cullehill, where Follyfest continues this weekend, it is 13 degrees.
Saturday View on Midlands 103 with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcloonEnergy.com.
Now, Waterways Ireland have been in the headlines of late. They've been in front of the Oireachtas going over their accounts, but there's been plenty of complaint and protest from certain quarters, including the VFI, the Vintners Federation of Ireland, over increases to their registration fees, their mooring fees, questions over the north-south aspect of the waterways as well. So there's been a lot going on in that respect. Maybe to get an idea of what it's like to actually work on our waters, to work in the River Shannon, for instance, we're going to get an idea from Morgan Smith, Managing Director of Silverline Cruises in Banagher. Morgan, we're in the teeth of the summer. With my ignorance, I'm presuming we're in high season for yourselves. How's business ticking over?
Good morning. Business has been reasonably good. We're down in certain areas and we're slightly up in other areas, but by and large we're on a par with this time last year. And last year was up on the previous years. So so far we're happy enough with the way things are going. Okay,
and tell me this then. Well, how do the seasons or seasonality work? Is it a case that summer is your peak, winter gets quiet?
The Shannon system for us and holiday makers is that we're closed during the winter. So it's very seasonal. We commence in generally around Patrick's weekend, being weather dependent, and we finish at the October bank holiday weekend. Okay. After that, the water levels rise, and for our customers, it becomes too difficult for them to navigate and operate the cruisers.
At the start of our conversation here, I mentioned some of the negative headlines that are around Waterways Ireland in relation to them increasing their rates. These are rates, I suppose, that haven't gone up in a very long time. So in that respect, they would say that that's how they're justifying it. From your perspective, with that kind of professional access and understanding of how all of this works, what do you make of the conversation that's been going on? We may as well just touch on, for instance, they're looking to increase the annual registration fees from €127 set in 1988 to €200. That €127 fee applied only to canals and not to the Shannon, where no registration fee was currently applied. And then the mooring fees from 62 quid going up to 300. But again, they're saying they haven't gone up since 1988. What do you make of this?
Look, it will certainly have an effect on us in the sense that we would also have to pay the proposed fee of €200 per annum on each cruiser we have. However, we would understand the need for the change. We don't typically agree with the idea that it's prohibitive. Like Waterways Ireland have a tough enough job to do, and they do provide a good service. They've quite an infrastructure to look after. There are lock and bridge charges that that have to be managed. And for us, the €200 per annum fee represents good value in relation to what's on offer. People don't have to pay for overnight moorings in Waterways Ireland harbours. It will eliminate the current lock and bridge charge, which is, as you said, almost archaic. It's over 30 years old at $150 per passage, and like that, for Waterways Ireland to collect that money and simply lodge it to the bank, it probably costs them more money than what they're actually making there. So it takes revenue for Waterways to be constantly improving their service and their facilities, and we wouldn't necessarily disagree with the 200 with the €200 per annum charge.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily agree with everything that they do. For example, we'd like to see them being a bit more proactive in terms of refuse collection in harbours and that. But all these harbours and their infrastructure have to be managed, and that does cost money. And by and large, we'd broadly support the measure if we think that it would lead to a more effective and efficiently managed waterway.
Yeah, a big part of the operation is obviously making sure that they're resourced properly so that they can fulfil their responsibilities on their end. So maybe these increased fees will help them in that direction. What's the biggest challenge of the work that you do yourself, Morgan? The kind of stuff that gives you pause for thought on a daily or a weekly basis?
Well, that can vary. Like, for example, last year, a serious concern we had was actually the bad weather and high water. Yeah. And that's just something that was out of anybody's control, really. It rained too much, the weather was poor, and it certainly affected our business from an operational point of view. Certainly
last year, your concerns there were the fact that the high water levels and the rain made it harder for you to go about your work. So there's been a fair bit of rain this summer as well, I suppose.
Well, yes. Look, the weather hasn't been marvellous so far. However, water levels are normal, and I suppose because we're seasonal. In an ideal world, we'd prefer fine weather all the time, but that's not to be the case in Ireland. And thankfully, most of our customers don't come to the Shannon for fine weather. They come here for various different reasons, but we're not totally weather dependent. But the sort of extreme weather and extreme flooding of last year certainly doesn't help from an operational point of view.
From a perspective of like being busy and there being pleasure cruisers on the water and this type of thing, is people's appetite for that tied to, say, for instance, stuff like the general economy? I was reading previously that after the crash, a lot of this stuff stopped because of the situation people were in. So if the economy is performing better, your business would be one that probably does benefit to some degree.
No, it does for sure, and we'll say, for example, since prior to COVID, our domestic market would have been round about the 20 to maybe 25% of our business. During COVID, that rose to 100%. So there is a quite an interest in the domestic market for Shannon cruising, and obviously now that we're evolving since COVID, the economy is now dependent. It would have a factor on how our domestic market performs, and our hope would be, since COVID, to try to keep that domestic level up at maybe over 30%.
That's Morgan Smith, the Managing Director of Silverline Cruises. A big thanks to him for taking the time to talk to us this morning on Saturday View. Remember, 083 30 10 103 with your thoughts on what Morgan was talking about. If we get good value on our waterways or not, The National Transport Authority is recommending a 9% increase in taxi prices after their own review. However, that's not where this story ends. You'll find out more after the break.
Saturday View on Midlands 103 with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. Lumcloonenergy.com.
Now, the National Transport Authority, it looks like they're set to recommend taxis put their prices up by 10%. Probably not the news that consumers were hoping to hear, considering many of us still believe we're in the teeth of a cost of living crisis. To maybe put a bit of sense around this and to understand what's going on with the process, Kieran White, well known, of course, on Midlands 103 from Kiki Cabs in Mullingar, joins us. Kieran, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, that's okay, David. Good morning to you and your listeners.
Tell us then this 10% increase. What's the motive behind it? How does this whole process work?
The National Transport Authority, they conduct what's known as a maximum fare review every 2 years. So the fares are up for review at the moment. Now, just because they review the fares doesn't mean they automatically go up. They have the capacity to take them down as well, as far as I know. That's my understanding of it at this time. Now, they will do a public consultation that's taking place. That's just up for start now at the moment. Now, anyone can make a submission, and under the public consultation, all service providers and service users and the public in general, anyone with a vested interest in the business, taxi business or industry, can make a submission to the National Transport Authority of what they think that should recommend they complete a case for an increase or decrease in fares, whatever the case may be. It's just to do with legislation. Now, there'll also be, to the best of my knowledge, the fares are audited as well by an auditing company. I'm not sure who they are, but they would take that into account as well, and then they decide what needs to be done. That just because it's recommended maybe 10% doesn't necessarily mean that they'll give 10%. They take into account the public consultation, and as well as that, that 10% could be weighted at night time to get more drivers to work at night time. So that might mean that the day prices might only see a few percent, whereas the night time prices might go up to encourage people to come out and work at night. It'll be spread over the two fare structures. We have Tariff 1 and Tariff 2, a day rate and a night rate. So that's basically it in a nutshell. They're just following the legislation that they have to follow every 2 years,
If as a taxi driver, Kieran, you were canvassed, would you have a perspective on it yourself? Like, do you feel that as a taxi driver, you're feeling the squeeze at the moment in terms of what your overheads are, or do you think it charges are in the right place at the moment?
They are at the moment, but any sort of an increase will always be welcomed as such, if you know what I mean. You need a little bit of money behind you for worst case scenario, or something goes wrong with the car, or that, cars have gone up in price, especially the second-hand market has gone through the roof now as well. A lot of people are going hybrid and electric cars. I'm sitting in a hybrid now at the moment. I've recently switched over to a hybrid. They're a little bit more dear than what you'd get a diesel car for as well. So basically, I would say, you'd nearly always want to look at raising them, whatever the case may be, whatever they recommend. Now, before COVID, now we usually only get maybe 2 or 3% for a raise. The last one we got 2 years ago was 12%, but that was spread across the two tariffs.
Okay, and do you think? I'm not
going to say no, we don't need it, to be honest with you. I mean, it's always difficult to survive. It's always difficult to make sure that you're covered.
The other side of this coin, I suppose, is going too far. Is there a point at which there's a cliff edge and customers will stop looking to use taxis if they get to a certain cost?
I think there'll always be people that will use taxis from A to B. It's a maximum fare structure. Just because it says that on the meter, that's as much as you're allowed to charge. If you want to give a discount as well, off your own bat to encourage business, that's up to you.
Sure,
that's up to you. You can do that for yourself. If you want to, that we are a service that is needed, no matter what. And even with the shortage of taxis there in the cities and that, and the large towns at the moment, like last weekend, people were crying out for public transport with all that was going on in Dublin. I think there'll always be a market there, and I think probably if the logic as well could be to try and get more people to come in and start working in the industry to make it a more attractive job prospect for people as well.
Is it proving a difficult industry to recruit in? Do you think the ranks of taxi drivers actually needs investment in terms of increasing?
Yeah, it's very hard to get drivers now. The larger companies are getting very hard to recruit drivers, so they are. There's a shortage of people coming into the industry as well, actually actively pursuing the procurement of a small public service vehicle driver's license. There's not really many people interested in actually uptaking it as a career as such at this time. And maybe this might be a carrot on the stick for the National Transport Authority. They might be trying to encourage people to pick up on coming into the industry. You wouldn't know, that logic could be there as well. Perhaps maybe it's just chewing the fat here, from that point of view.
Yeah.
It's just having a discussion as such, but the cost of doing business in this country is quite high. You have little businesses closing, coffee shops and restaurants closing left, right, and centre. You have other shops in Mullingar that you would never have expected to close, closing down as well. People are getting hard to survive, and it's all to do with costs. And putting them up by 10%, if that's what they do, maybe part of the logic is trying to preserve that industry as well, But then again, if there was a 10% increase in your shopping, well, again, they'd be complaining as well. So there's the two sides of the coin there, as you say, as well. So that would be my take on it now.
No, that's eminently sensible, to be fair. And as you said, it's only the kind of beginning of this process and story, so it'll be something to keep an eye on.
It is, yeah.
A final question there, Ciarán, is you mentioned you've a hybrid yourself, and obviously there's an initial outlay that's more expensive there. Do you find, as a taxi driver, that investment ultimately is paying off in terms of what you might be saving driving hybrid?
It's too early to say. It does seem to use a lot less fuel, yeah, absolutely. Except when you go on a longer journey and you're using the petrol engine more on the motorway or that. But around town, short distance drives, it's using the electric motor a lot, so it's not using a whole lot of fuel. But I'd say I've only had it out about a month.
Sure. Look, yeah, you have plenty of time to get your head around it in that instance then, anyway.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Ciarán, much appreciate you taking time. Ciarán White from Kiki Cabs in Mullingar. Okay. Take her handy. Thanks again.
Okay, good luck.
Good man, Ciarán. We are taking a break very shortly. Just before that, a quick touch on sport. Yes, as the sports editor of the station, I'm going to throw this hat on. Offaly against Westmeath in the All-Ireland Intermediate Camogie Championship. It's win or bust for both counties. We'll have updates throughout the afternoon. Throw-in is at 2 o'clock, and Mark Hughes will be bringing you the latest from that game. Jason Keelan's on the ground for us over there. Other headlines in the world of sport, of course, the Euros. We've seen the hosts Germany depart after a thrilling game that they lost in extra time, the last minute of extra time as well. A remarkable match that, followed by an absolute stinker between France and Portugal. France have booked their passage through as well, and a big congratulations to Leona Maguire, the Cavan woman, won on the European Tour for the first time to add to the LPGA and the Solheim Cup victories she has had. After the break, we will be finding out why a woman who has a love of huskies has been driven to climb one of the highest mountains in Europe.
In a fast-track world, slow down and experience bliss for body and mind at Wineport Lodge.
So, our final piece on Saturday View is about a woman whose love of huskies has driven her to climb one of the highest mountains in Europe. Let's hear from my interview with Samantha Toner this week. Next on Saturday View, I want to introduce you to a woman who's taking on a serious challenge. She's climbing a mountain that goes up nearly 5 kilometres vertical, as it were. One of the biggest mountains in the western continent of Europe, in the French Alps, Mont Blanc, many will know it. Samantha Toner joins us on the programme. Samantha, you're doing this, and it's a serious challenge, but it's for a seriously good cause as well. You might tell us why it is you're taking on Mont Blanc first.
Well, firstly, I suppose I did the 32 peaks in 32 days last year, and I suppose really to call myself a mountaineer, I have to tackle bigger mountains. And the Alps was definitely a great place for me to do that. But when I saw Mont Blanc is 4,800 metres high. The Alps are average 4,000 metres. It really sticks out. And it's definitely a mountain that a lot of mountaineers want to conquer. Being the highest peak in Western Europe as well, and me trying to conquer high peaks, I definitely had to put Mont Blanc onto my list. I didn't realise how much it would entail in terms of training, though. It's been quite tough, but I'm very determined to do it, and I'm determined to do it for the Huskies of Husky Rescue Ireland, who they need support. Awareness, of course, will help with that support in any way in terms of volunteers or raising funds, anything that we can get to support Husky Rescue Ireland.
Yeah, and we'll cut to the chase very quickly on that. If you want to donate to Husky Rescue Ireland, their website is, I have it in front of me here, is huskyrescueireland.ie, and there's a donate button there for any listeners who want to do that. Samantha, the challenge itself is really daunting, and as you said there's a lot of preparation that you're putting into it. Talk us through the kind of training that you have to do to take on Mont Blanc.
Well, firstly, when you're up at that altitude, you only have about 52%, 56% of the oxygen that you would here down at sea level. So I'm training at the moment with a training mask where you can reduce your oxygen by 25%, 50% and 75%. So, it's hard enough going to the gym for an hour or two, or, taking on, I'd be training on Lugnaquilla quite a lot, which is the highest peak in Wicklow and Leinster. So it's tough enough doing that anyway, but when you're reducing your oxygen on that, it's extremely tiring. But if you're going to, the incline on the day is a 7-hour incline on summit day, and you really need to pace yourself on that. This training mask will support it, but it's not going to be anything what it's going to be like up there. You're going to face things like altitude sickness. There's always the fear of avalanches, rock fall. And so I've actually had to purchase helicopter rescue insurance as well for that. So that was quite a scary purchase, as you can imagine.
That's wild. And how do you feel about all of this? I imagine 32 peaks in 32 days in Ireland is amazing, but our geography or geology is so totally different to what you're talking about regarding the Alps.
It's completely different, I actually went over to Snowdonia there a couple of weeks ago, so I'm summiting with Mont Blanc Guides, and they're a UK company who operate over in Chamonix where you start, and they did a little Mont Blanc training course, and I was like, oh, Snowdonia, grand, it's only up in Wales, very similar to Ireland, but we have to do a lot of climbing, grade 3 scrambling, rope training. So for the duration of summit day, I will be roped on to someone else. If I go over, there's a very thin ridge going up to the peak. So if I go over, I'll be on rope and I have to learn how to, get myself back up. But my guide could go over, and I have to learn, you're going to have ice pins and you can pin yourself in and then pull him up. So rope training was very important. Snow and ice training was very important. I went over to Ben Nevis and I did snow and ice training in January and went up in a snowstorm, which I was terrified. But
wow.
The guy that brought me up was like, oh, this is standard stuff, and I was like, oh my God, it's crazy. So you have to learn how to use, the crampons and the ice axe. And we're practicing that falling over the edge and using your ice axe to kind of dig into the snow and get right into the ice and pull yourself back up. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this again? But then you go online, you go to Husky Rescue Ireland and you see all those dogs that need to be rehomed and fostered, and you're like, oh, it just reminds you why you're doing it. So I'm actually going to head down to Husky Rescue Ireland next Saturday to meet Andy Cullen and chat about the dogs and the vet bills and motivate myself to get back into training and just continue.
Yeah, the Husky Rescue Ireland's based down in Cullohill in Laois, or near Cullohill in Laois there. And what's your attraction to Husky Rescue Ireland? What was the motivation to specifically identify with them?
Well, I had an Akita myself for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And Husky Rescue Ireland, they're one of the only animal shelters that will take in Akitas, because they're such a large breed and they can be quite dangerous as well, and the Huskies as well. So I don't know how I came across them on Instagram, but then I became fascinated with the work that he does and how selfless he is, and everything that he does for the Akitas and Huskies. And kind of the more you learn, the more you get invested in it as well. So it's become, after Trooper died, I've been working with them and trying to do anything I can between 32 and 32, or even just going down and taking a dog out for a walk, because they really are lacking volunteers. These dogs need to be walked a lot. As you can imagine, Huskies are pulling dogs naturally. So they want to be out all the time. They want to be worked all day, not kept in cages all day, So that's where the attraction came from.
Well, it's perfectly reasonable. In terms of Husky Rescue Ireland, when you're talking to Andy, does he ever give you any insight as to what the lay of the land is regarding like dog ownership in this country and breeding? Seems to there's an ongoing issue there. Does he ever speak to that type of thing when you're down there?
Oh yeah, he gets, obviously naturally he'd be very angry about, these puppy farms, and I don't know if you saw this thing going around Instagram recently about puppy yoga, and they were questioning, like they called them out on it, like where are the puppies coming from? And then where do they go after yoga? It's there's a lot going on. I think that all kind of started around COVID, when everybody wanted to get dogs and people saw it as a money-making thing. And, dogs are, especially full breeds, can be quite pricey. He's trying to, he'll actually export some of the dogs over to Sweden, because obviously Huskies are required in Sweden and they'll be used as working dogs over there, and that's what they want. So I think people in Ireland see Huskies and Akita breeds as, they look great and
designer dogs, this type of thing.
Exactly, yeah. But then when you actually take it out on a walk and it starts pulling you, it can be quite frustrating, because it can't kind of walk beside you or whatever. They're trained to pull, and they will pull you. It'd be quite difficult to walk them. You can't keep them locked in apartments all day, so people tend to kind of give them up after a year or two. And so there's a lot of abandoned Huskies in Ireland.
Okay, yeah, and look, if anyone can spare time to help Andy down in Husky Rescue Ireland in Cullohill, then we know that he'd be massively grateful on that front. Let's bring it back to this challenge. When exactly are you going to be scaling Mont Blanc?
So I'm going to be heading over to Chamonix on the 1st of September. To acclimatise, I'll be climbing Gran Paradiso, which is one of the highest peaks in Italy. So that's 3 days, 2 days up, 1 day down, and then on the 9th of September is Mont Blanc, the big one.
That's very soon, Samantha. Not far away at all.
I know. I'm very scared.
How did you get into hiking and climbing? Like, when did this whole experience come to you? Because obviously, to do what you did with 32 in 32, that's a huge challenge in and of itself, and would have been super energy consuming and everything.
Well, actually, initially it started, I grew up in Ronan up beside the Dublin Mountains, and I joined the Scouts when I was younger, so it's kind of in me from a young age. But then, you become a teenager, and I broke away from all of that. But then it was when I got Trooper, it was when I got my Akita. I got him as a puppy, and I was like, what is this dog? And I remember I'd never heard of an Akita before, and I Googled it and saw what he was going to grow up to, this monster of a dog, and I was like, oh my God, he's going to need a lot of walking. So it was him. I used to walk him all around the Dublin Wicklow Mountains. He just wants to be walked all day, every day. And I was very happy to do so. Because, as I said, I grew up beside the Dublin Mountains. So I absolutely love walking around there. So that's how it started. And then when he passed away, I was like, oh, I don't have a dog to walk around the mountains anymore. So then that's how 32 and 32 came up. It's he loved the Dublin Wicklow Mountains. That's where I would have spent most of my time. And I hadn't really explored outside of that. So I got to explore, the high peak of every single county in Ireland then.
Wow. And I presume that brought you to the Schlieve Blooms around our parts in the Midlands.
Oh my God. Absolutely amazing. I kept saying I need to come back here and do more hiking around that area. It was absolutely stunning.
It's amazing what the country has when you actually take the time to go and find it.
Yeah, to go around and go find these places. Yeah, I have a list of places to go back, but Mont Blanc first.
Yes, indeed. That is the thing to focus on here. I love that the acclimatisation is scaling a mountain that would knock the socks off of everyone else here.
Like, that's when they told me that. It's like, really, our warm-up mountain is Grand Party, so that's a challenge in itself. Like,
yeah, and ultimately the coolest thing is that you're using those crampons to scale up walls of ice. That's amazing.
Basically, yeah, and ice axes to push into the ice. When I slip and fall and start sliding, I just like ram that ice axe in, and that's what it's for.
Well, one side of me thinks you've gone round the bend. The other side of me thinks you're absolutely brilliant for doing this and doing it for Husky Rescue Ireland. And we really appreciate you talking to us on Saturday View this morning.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Samantha Toner finishing up my time on Saturday View this weekend. A big thanks to those messaging in. I've got a great picture of Alfie sitting on a bed here, a gorgeous husky, and another person saying congratulations to Samantha for what she's doing, and congratulating the Husky Rescue Centre down in Laois for the great work that they do. That's our lot on Saturday View. Lorraine McCormick's coming up next. Aren't you privileged? We're hitting the news at 11 o'clock.